Welcome to this event of Visualizing Diversity in Amsterdam and Birmingham. The partnership between the University of Amsterdam and the University of Birmingham was formed in 2019 to focus on two things: equality, diversity, and inclusion, which we abbreviate to EDI, and medical training and research. They started this collaboration because EDI is of highest importance to both universities, as both are also located in highly diverse cities. And working together has enabled academics, students, and professional staff across universities to research, teach, and promote EDI. And this is the third out of 4 events this year from the EDI Festival. And a link to the events page has been posted in the chat. So do feel free to join the last event as well. And this event will be about discussion between the diversity officers of both universities. Then we start. I'm Eline Troquay. I'm a student ambassador for the University of Amsterdam, and so is Safaa Souri. And I'd like also to introduce my fellow EDI ambassador, Raneem Alterkawi. She is from the University of Birmingham. And the event is divided in 2 parts. Amsterdam will present first, and then Birmingham will follow. And after each part, there will be a Q&A session. And at any moment, you can pose your question in the Q&A box. And Raneem and I will then pose your question anonymously to the panelists after each presentation. Then some other things that are good to know. This session is being recorded, but only the panelists will be visible. And a live transcript should be visible on your screen, and the chat has been turned off, but if you have questions, you can post them in the Q&A box as mentioned before. And that being said, we're gonna get started. So allow me to introduce our speakers for the first part, Maxime Gerber and Kelly Nieuwenhuis. They're 2 exchange students from the University of Amsterdam, where Maxime studies chemistry, and she went on exchange to Paris in France, and Kelly studies international business and spent 4 months in Calgary in Canada, and they will now take you on a virtual tour through Amsterdam. Enjoy.
Okay, let me welcome you to this virtual tour through Amsterdam. Today Maxime and I will take you through Amsterdam in this virtual setting. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we can't go there that easily in person right now, so we thought it would be nice to bring Amsterdam to you in this way. Together with a group of student ambassadors, we have researched equity, diversity, and inclusion, which we will mention now on as EDI. And this research brought us on a tour throughout Amsterdam and a bunch of history. And today, in this virtual tour, we will share some of our findings with you by taking you along on this tour with us. So we're mainly going to go through the progress of EDI as we found it as students. This is a short timeline of the events that we will go through today, just to give you a bit of an overview of the timestamps that are related to these topics that we're going through. So first, I'd like to start off with the topic of sexuality. It's actually very interesting to mention that gay marriage was legalized in the Netherlands on the 1st of April in 2001, which is now almost 20 years ago. The Netherlands was actually the first country to legalize gay marriage, and since then, a bunch of countries have followed. As for sexuality and the LGBTQ+ community within Amsterdam, there is a student association called ASV Gay. This is a student association with a lot of members who focus on anything surrounding the topic of LGBTQ+, and they have weekly borrels. This is a Dutch word for having drinks with a bunch of friends and just having a fun time together. If you're interested in finding out more about this organization, you can of course Google them and even join them if you'd like to. To continue on, we also have a gay monument in Amsterdam. This monument has been placed as a remembrance for all the queer people that have been prosecuted because of their sexual orientation. Even though gay marriage is now legalized in, I think it's about 28 countries up to date, there is still a lot more to be reached, and also a lot to remember that has happened in our history surrounding people because of their sexuality. Next up, we actually have a really interesting cafe, and this is also a historical monument. This is Café Het Mandje, which was opened in 1927 by Bet van Beren. She was an openly lesbian woman, and this poses therefore a very interesting monument within Amsterdam's gay history, as from a very early point onwards, it provided a place for people with their sexuality where they could go to and feel at home. Lastly, on the topic of sexuality, what we wanted to share with you is that there are actually a bunch of gay flags throughout Amsterdam. While we were taking photos of monuments and other things in Amsterdam, there were so many of these flags around. And I think it's amazing to say that we come from a university in a city where there is so much support for this community around. This flag is actually taken at the bridge that is across from the Theater Carré, which is located in the center of Amsterdam. It's a very cool place that a lot of people travel by, so it's amazing to see this symbol of the community being located over there. And then I will now hand the floor to Maxime for our next topic.
Thank you. Right, so first off, we had sexuality, and now we will continue on to gender as our next topic, which will start at the UvA. All the UvA university locations have introduced gender-neutral bathrooms from 2016 and on, which was an idea of a student. Well, it was basically a student initiative, which has been widespread in the coming years. Then going on in gender, we have a monument of a very important woman in Amsterdam, whose name was Wilhelmina Drucker. She was a women's rights activist, and this statue of a young woman with open arms, it symbolizes a young person with an uninhibited future ahead, which is very special. Then next to that, we also have something more focused on women, specifically women in the faculties of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Women in the Faculty is a student initiative focusing on these female students in these studies, and also gender equality within academia. Women in the Faculty have a mentoring program. They organize workshops and lectures and other initiatives. Then we have our next topic, which is religion. And also we start at the UvA. From 2016 and on, silent rooms were introduced at all UvA locations, which was also initiated by a student, part of the Central Student Council. The 4 so-called contemplation rooms are located at different sites and bring the university buildings neutral, inclusive, uniform spaces. These rooms can be used by all students and staff members as long as the house rules are respected. And these silent rooms provide a space where meditation of all religions is facilitated. Next to that, we have a very deep Jewish history in Amsterdam. So we would like to highlight the monument of Jewish resistance, which is a remembrance of all Jews who passed during the Second World War. And then we continue to our next topic.
Yeah, so for the following topic, we're going to go into freedom of expression. Actually, within the Netherlands, freedom of expression is a very important topic, and a lot of people value the freedom of expression we have in our country. So first off, something that we would like to highlight is actually Waterlooplein, or Waterloo Square, if you want to pronounce it in an English way. This is one of the many squares that we have in Amsterdam, and the photo you can see on the right is a protest at this square, and this is actually a protest for Uganda. This is one of so many protests that are happening around in the city. Even in the entire country, protests are, I wouldn't say occurring frequently, but there is an opportunity for people to express their feelings and ideas if they want to. And this shows how important it is to be able to express your opinions and express your ideas when you want to, and how nice it is to have that freedom to do so as well. Another monument that is very important within freedom of expression is the Spinoza Monument. This is actually a statue that celebrates Spinoza and his ideas about freedom of speech. The engraving around the statue says, "The purpose of the state is freedom." And this is another thing that will help to celebrate Amsterdam's multicultural society and shows the inclusivity that we have in this city and how we're trying to make sure that everybody has their place and can share their opinions, ideas, thoughts, feel free to be whoever they are, and find a community to be that person in as well. And then on to the following topic, which is also very important within inclusion, is physical disabilities. Also within the student community, disability occurs. It might not be something you see every day, but it is definitely there. A faculty student council of the Faculty of Physics, Maths, and Information Sciences actually strive towards creating an environment in which everybody feels safe and included. And then in this case, especially people who have a disability, to make sure that they are part of student life too, and that they can experience the student life just like everybody else. And also on the topic of physical disabilities is actually the National Monument on Dam Square. This monument is probably a pretty famous one within Amsterdam, as it is very central, close to Central Station. And this is a monument in remembrance of the victims of World War II. Every year on the 4th of May, with our remembrance of the war, this monument is very central as people lay flowers on it, and the whole, yes, I wouldn't call it a celebration, but a remembrance is presented around it. However, this monument initially was not accessible for people in wheelchairs. So in 2007, a wheelchair ramp was added to make sure that everybody can be included within this monument and also have it accessible to everybody, which is of course very important within a city like Amsterdam.
I think that takes us to our final part and final topic of this virtual tour, which is prosperity, where we start with a school which is called Hack Your Future. It's a coding school that offers a free 7-month web development program for talented refugees and other disadvantaged groups with limited access to education and labor market. They train people in computer programming, which significantly boosts their chances of fulfilling long-term employment in that sector. And they also help to satisfy the demand for tech talent on the job market. The not-for-profit organization or non-profit organization was founded in 2016 and is now active in 4 countries already. Next to that, we have Spark Village, which is a residential complex for young people from 18 to 27 years old. It was established in 2018, and asylum status holders and refugees, as well as students, live together. And they build a community that focuses on 3 values, which is attention to others, openness, and social responsibility. And this is where we are coming to the end of this tour. We're arriving at the present of this, historical timeline. I would like to thank, first of all the members of our student ambassador team for all the research that was carried out. So as we see here, we have Carmen, Terry, Annelei, Carla, Emma, Anne, and Pauline. And of course, there were many more. Our UvA ambassador team is part of the UvA Exchange Ambassador Program, which is a voluntary-based program for incoming and outgoing exchange students with training lectures, several professional skills and opportunities to put ideas into projects, such as this EDI Festival. And while we were doing our research, we came into contact with a lot of communities and initiatives and organizations, and a lot of, development on EDI grounds was met, but also many uncovered challenges were found. And we are very happy to have initiated or stimulated as well more developments within these organizations or initiatives. So finally, we have come to the conclusion that there is a lot that's already going on at the moment, but there's always room for improvement. There's always this blank page which is our symbolic way of finalizing our tour, where there is so much more to be done, and we can already be proud of what has happened already. But yeah, there's always more possible. So thank you all for listening to this short virtual tour through Amsterdam on the topic of EDI, and we are happy to hear all the questions.
Yeah, so thank you to Kelly and Maxime for this excellent presentation that really gave us an overview of diversity and inclusion in Amsterdam. I think what was most important about this was seeing the historical context as well as how EDI is still reflected in the city today. So for now, Eline and I are going to be opening the floor for questions. So feel free to keep them coming. I think we have a question here about what do you think is the most visible EDI community in Amsterdam? And I assume by that they mean maybe the most prominent community, or yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, if I can give an answer to that, what I already said about the pride flags throughout Amsterdam, I think definitely the LGBTQ community is a very big one. We also have a pride parade in Amsterdam every year at the beginning of the academic year, so around the start of fall. And it's a pretty big event that attracts people actually from all over the world. And also seeing that gay marriage was legalized here already 20 years ago, it's just been a very big topic within the society here. So I would definitely say that that is one of the biggest communities, also because it is on the forefront. So for example, with physical disabilities, it's also more of a thing with a wheelchair ramp being added to some place. It's not something that may stand out, nevertheless still important, but in that sense, I'd say the LGBTQ community is very visible.
And there's a second question. Someone says, this is all deeply inspiring. I'm wondering about the presence and visibility of the far right in the Netherlands and how much resistance there is to EDI in the country.
The far right, is that what you were saying? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the far right.
How much resistance is coming? Well, I think...
Yeah, sorry, I wouldn't say there's a lot of visible resistance, honestly, because I think everybody will always have opinions on things and people might disagree with each other, which is also, again, an advantage of our democracy here. So yeah, I don't know, Maxime, if you want to add something to it.
Well, I think resistance is part of everything, but the most important thing of EDI is that there are people who recognize it, people who want to improve it and make everything as inclusive and diverse as possible for everyone. So I think that's the most important thing, that there is so much room for improvement and that there are people that are really like stepping up to do that.
Okay, so I think that covers everything. So we'll move on to another question. Here we have, sorry, just looking. Out of the many initiatives that you've discussed, what do you think is the most successful one? So, do you want to answer?
That's a tough question, honestly.
Yeah.
As we said, it is a work in progress, ending with the blank page. I think there's always more to be done. And that's also a takeaway message we want to give to you. So in terms of the most successful, I don't want to say one thing is more successful than the other, because Amsterdam as a city has already reached so much, in the Netherlands as a country too. So I would just say that everything has been successful so far, and we should be proud on the amount of EDI we've been able to establish within the university, within the city, and see that as a great baseline to continue from again in the future.
Yes, and if I can add to that, I think it's also important to stress that what we just presented was only a narrowed down selection of initiatives in a format of a timeline and with topics. So this is not just everything there is so much more, and this is probably only half of what we found in our research. So I believe that there is a lot of very, very successful work going on at the moment.
And then there is a question that goes as follows. Good afternoon. EDI is gaining attention also outside university life. How do you think EDI is incorporated in business in Amsterdam? So the life after studying.
Wow. Well, I think that's a little bit beyond the scope of this this research that we were doing. Also, because we focused on within university life since we are students ourselves. But I do believe that also within the lectures that we had during our program, it was really stressed that selection as a general process is something that happens everywhere, obviously, not only at universities, but also within the job community. And I think that's something that really has a lot of attention for EDI and how to really improve that system. So I think that's one of the things that also covers for business, but I don't know if that's a real good answer to the question, since it's not really the scope of our research.
Yeah, if I can add something shortly, I would just say the Netherlands is, of course, a pretty free country in itself. So I would say that this is also portrayed within business life. But of course, I don't know the exact details as I'm not within business life myself yet. And I think there's always room for improvement within anything. But yeah, as far as I can tell, coming from our society, I'm hoping and seeing that EDI is definitely present there to at least some extent.
Okay, so moving on to our next question. Here it says, very interesting. What do you think that a city like Amsterdam can teach other cities in terms of LGBT plus inclusion?
Well, I think, again, seeing that the Netherlands was the first to legalize gay marriage, I think that is honestly the first step and the first big lesson other countries could look into. We were an example for other countries to follow and to also legalize gay marriage and be more open towards this community. And I think that especially the Pride Parade nowadays is a really great attraction for many people from across the world. It's becoming more covered within news, in the news as well. And I think that's, it's really good to at least create awareness and to, in that sense, help people learn that it's good to be open. You don't always have to agree with certain ideas, but it's good to at least respect each other, be open towards other ideas, and have respectful discussions about it. And I think that that is a great lesson that we should definitely follow along, and that other cities might be able to learn from Amsterdam.
Okay, then how is Amsterdam similar and different from other Dutch cities in terms of EDI?
I believe that Amsterdam has always been quite the leading city in all of this, and also in its history that Amsterdam was quite the main traffic place for a lot of things. So I think how do you really catch that?
Maybe you're trying to say that Amsterdam is sort of the leading city in things, but that EDI is definitely present within all other cities too, but maybe on a different level. I mean, even in such a small country, there's a ton of different cultures around, so every city is different. But yeah,
I think the largest difference is mainly between large cities and the rural areas. I think that's something that's not very specific for the Netherlands as a country, but more generally speaking, the rural areas really do need more EDI stimulation, I would say.
Okay, so we have a question. What would you take away from your EDI research and participation in the Ambassadors Program? What's next for you on EDI?
Well, personally, I'm taking away the blank page as a really big point of where we're standing right now, and that definitely more should be done and could be done. So that's something that I'm personally really taking away from this research and everything that we've seen and discussed. And how I want to continue from this right now. Well, I have my studies to focus on, but I'm also hoping that in business life, once I start working, hopefully in a few months, that I'll be able to see how EDI is going over there and maybe in a way help out in that sense too, or on another voluntary basis, be in a committee somewhere to help out and make sure that EDI is part of those organizations too.
Yeah, and I think for me, because I agree, but also for me, it was a real eye opener that EDI is so much broader than what first comes to mind. So I think EDI can be found in so many unexpected places and can be improved in so many unexpected and small, simple ways. So that's something that's really my takeaway from this.
I think that before we start with the second part, we can do 2 more questions. So that will be, what would you tackle first? What has a priority to improve?
Just in general within EDI?
Yeah, I think at least that's what is meant with the question.
That's a tough one because you can go in any direction with it. I would say that we should maybe focus on the less prominent topics of EDI, because the LGBTQ community, that's right now a pretty big thing already. There's a lot around it. Same maybe with gender, how it's established within the Netherlands. So maybe it would be a good thing to focus on the topics that are not the first things you would think of surrounding EDI. So maybe physical disability within student communities. How can you make sure that people with a physical disability can also visit your drinks or parties or whatever you're organizing? Because it's not the first thing you might think of, but I think that's also a very important topic to keep in mind and to also focus on.
I agree.
I think we have time maybe for one last question. Here we have, how would you recommend other students can get involved with EDI in their community?
Well, start educating yourself. That's a very good place to start, I would say. If you don't really take a lot of time you don't really have to do a lot of research, but even just Googling 5 minutes a day would be a great start to also change your own perspective on things and be more aware of your surroundings or within university life or on a very much broader scale as well. So I think that's a very, very good start.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that knowledge, information, and awareness are always great places to start. And in addition to that, we mentioned a few organizations. So you could always check within your own university what kind of organizations there are, whether they have committees that you could possibly join. Also great to have some voluntary experience, but also meet other people within the same communities and hear what their ideas are or what their experiences are within this world and the things that are happening in it. So there are definitely a few points where you could start from.
Yes, definitely. So I think we'll have to wrap it up for the Q&A. So I just want to once again thank you, Kelly and Maxime, for your great discussion. And thanks to all of you for the lively interaction. And I think this is a really important start for these type of conversations. So now we'll be moving on to a project that is being created by Dr. Penelope Mendanza. And she has been doing this work in collaboration with the student ambassadors from the University of Birmingham and the University of Amsterdam. Penelope is an independent graphic facilitator and cartoonist, and she has over 30 years of experience in the UK public and voluntary sectors. She does a lot of work around illustrations of people's lived experiences who have been impacted by austerity, structural discrimination, racism, and abuse, and so on. So before that, I think it would be good to start by introducing Dr. Sammy Lee, who is the advisor for student-led EDI at the University of Birmingham. And he will be giving an overview of why it's important to illustrate and create visual illustrations of EDI-related issues to facilitate conversation and understanding. So, thank you.
One of the reasons why we want to visualize it, apart from the lovely visual tour we just had about in Amsterdam, we know that it's important for us to normalize conversation about equality so that people can talk, so people can exchange ideas, and people can develop respect and understanding, or find a way to disagree better. But it's also important to recognize that having conversation about equality topics could be very difficult. There are a lot of values involved, there are different views and experience and so on. And the experience of exclusion or inclusion is very personal. It's very much like in your heart. It's not something that can be illustrated very easily just by word and language. And also, a lot of day-to-day experience of harassment, microaggression, situation is not overt. It's something based on the very subtle interactions of people in the fabric of the society. So what we want to do is to achieve facilitation of dialogue, and also to facilitate people to express their experience about equality issues. So that what we try to do is visualize experience, visualize diversity, and also visualize inequalities in a society. So one way we are doing it is to turn it into art and graphics to help people to use visual images to assess different conversations and topics about equality, and also for people to express about the things that they have happened in the past. That's why we would very much love to work on this with Pam and with the ambassadors from two universities about this project. And Pam is going to give a very brief overview about what we are doing so far and what we're going to develop in the next couple of months. Over to you, Pam.
Hi everyone, it's fantastic to meet you all. Some of you I've met already because we've had a conversation about this project, which has been really enjoyable, but also quite challenging. And I've heard so much pride in the cities that you're in, and learnt so much about them, but also been moved by some of the things that you've been sharing with me. So I want to start just by showing you just a few images. This is one that I worked on actually with Dr. Sammy Lee and another colleague of ours, Sheena Griffiths. And it's part of a project that we've been doing with the University of Birmingham around racial microaggression in higher education. And the way we started the project was to draw this graphic, which is kind of a first attempt at trying to capture some of the themes that we thought might come out of the project. And we shared it with a number of people because of the pandemic. We had to do a lot of it online, so we shared it on social media, and we got feedback from all sorts of different places, different universities around the world. And it was really just a way of stimulating conversation and getting people talking. So a lot of my work is really not about saying what's right or wrong, or this is the ultimate image or anything like that. It's really just about using visual tools to get people to kind of unpick ideas, to question each other, to try and get better dialogue around these topics, essentially. So actually, we're just completing this project now, and I'm so sure that once it's all formalized with the funders, Sammy could share this with those of you who are interested. The blue image at the top has actually come out of that project as well, and I just thought I'd include a little cropped version of it, partly because we haven't actually formally finished the project yet, but also because it's based on a roadmap, and that was kind of an interesting metaphor for the way some people from marginalised groups were feeling within higher education. For all sorts of reasons, sort of feeling a bit overwhelmed and like there's kind of lots of connections, but quite a bit of chaos as well for some groups in particular. So down here, I've got a couple of other examples of my work. In the middle is my work with UK Black Pride, which was actually mentioned in one of my interviews with participants of this project as well. And that was the celebration of the anniversary of Windrush, 70 years since the Windrush ship arrived from the Caribbean to Britain. So it was really a kind of supporting a celebration around migration. And on the two other sides is some work that I've done with cities that I thought I'd just throw in there as well. The one on the left-hand side is around diversity and inclusion in London, and on the right-hand side is around the way that people access support in Manchester. So that's people with long-term health conditions and disabilities, etc. So I did a PhD. So as Raneem said, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I'm sorry I sent you such a long bio, it was a bit over the top. But my PhD looked at my practice and other kinds of visual methods. And I came up with this idea of values-based cartooning, because obviously cartooning is kind of quite a controversial approach. There's been lots of very difficult and quite tragic issues around cartooning, where cartoonists have cartooning has been used throughout history to undermine and offend people as much as it has been used to empower people. And we've seen the results of that in things like, for example, the Charlie Hebdo shootings in Paris, and more recently, the killing of Samuel Paty, the history teacher. And so my PhD is really talking about the use of values in cartooning for working on things like inequalities, which is probably why it's a kind of a really interesting project for me, this one, because it brings together visual tools and this topic. But one of the things about values-based cartooning that's really important is the involvement of diverse perspectives and experiences in a piece of work. Lived experience, multiple perspectives. And what I try to do within my graphics is to hold lots of different ideas and values. And that can be a really difficult thing. And I never get it, I'll never do it perfectly. These two images, the one on the left-hand side was done in April last year. And it's about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black and other minoritized communities in Britain. And it's trying to encourage people to think about environmental issues such as housing, hostile environment policies, poverty, etc., structural racism, disablism and ageism. And this was at a time when there were questions being asked whether there were biological reasons for these inequalities, and the focus of this graphic was trying to get people to think, we need to think about a whole lot of issues and why this is happening. The one on the right hand side was done with the Raneem Trust, and that's they have a project called Reframing Racism, and so that's bringing together lots of ideas and concerns as well, and that's very much connected to Black Lives Matter. So here we are. I've got two images here, one of Raneem and one of Eline. Thank you very much, both of you. I didn't ask you permission to put these up there, but I hope you don't mind. I think I've done about, I feel like maybe I've done about 10 interviews so far, Sammy. I'm not entirely sure if that's right. And I must have at least 4 to go. So mostly so far I've been interviewing students in Birmingham, and I've heard less from students in Amsterdam. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you. And thank you so much for that presentation, and also for the questions that were posed to you as well. I'll try and get a copy of all the questions. But that was such an interesting discussion, and it just made me want to be in Amsterdam, really. I'm someone who knows it as a tourist, but really I don't know nearly enough about the city. So there's a lot of research for me involved in this project. So what we've been doing, for those of you who haven't done the interviews, is really just having an informal conversation with people about how they feel about EDI in the city that they're currently living. And then I've been using visual tools to basically draw and write as we've had those conversations. And I've taken these two images out just to show that what I'm doing is keeping people, trying to create space, safe spaces for people to have these conversations. So when I share any images, I've actually taken out any of their comments or any of their concerns, because what I'm trying to do is gather the themes together for the final image rather than actually say this person said this or this person said that. So basically I'm going to pull together all of these 14 conversations into one image about Amsterdam and Birmingham, and I have no idea how I'm going to pull that off, but I'm really looking forward to trying it. And then all of those involved will have an opportunity to come to a further meeting to look at the draft and give me any feedback before we finalise it. So really looking forward to the next steps, and I hope that gives you a bit of an overview. And I don't have any sense of time, so I hope I haven't gone on too long as well. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pan. So I think we do have some time for questions, if that's okay. I think we have a few minutes. So let's see. Wow, a lot of these are more compliments than questions. A lot of people are saying your work is so emotive and beautiful. The power art holds in projecting a message holds so much weight. And yeah, I think that is a really that comment really describes, I think, how most of us feel about your artwork. So thank you again for sharing that with us. Let's see. Okay, so we have a question. What do you think is the power of art in the work around EDI?
I think it's absolutely huge. I think, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, as I said before, and really, particularly visually, and that visual art is more my experience than other art forms, which I love consuming but can't contribute to it all. When I first started doing it, you know, like, and even really quite recently, the lack of diverse imagery, you know, reflecting all sorts of people, whether they have physical disabilities, mental health issues, intersectional identities, etc. I mean, there's just not enough imagery showing the world as it is and the people as we are, humanity as it is. And so I think the arts is really, visual arts is really, really important for that. But I also, and not everybody agrees with this, but I also think that while we're getting better at all that kind of stuff, sometimes we're so focused on trying to give positive images of everyone that we can forget to represent the barriers and attitudes and structural issues that people actually face, and they can remain invisible because we're just keep showing everybody as having agency and looking great and climbing to the top of mountains. So I think there's a really important balance to be found, and the arts can do that. The arts can kind of, they can say some difficult things at the same time as you know, celebrating humanity. But there is difficult. Sometimes I get it wrong. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes people are offended. But I was very interested in what you're also saying about free speech and the need to have a variety of ideas out there and to learn how to debate and to disagree, as Sammy was saying as well. So yeah, I think the arts is such a great space for all that. And I also don't think that it's just up to artists like me to do it. I think it's up to all of us to use the arts, to promote the arts, to share the arts, if we think it's going to help with the equality, diversity, inclusion agenda, or the equity. I'm just saying that out loud because I saw one of the questions was what does EDI stand for? And I think that's really important as well, that actually most people don't use that kind of language. So we need to find other ways to talk about these things and to share ideas around this.
Yeah, just to wide on Pan's conversation is the project that we are working outside of here. Another project is actually creating a toolkit to support people to generate their own art through value-based pattern. So everybody can draw. You don't have to be a professional painter. That everybody can express your own experience and image and via arts and your own painting, actually giving people confidence to draw it out, and also how to use your images to develop conversation, to express yourself. I think that's very important, that people feel they're able to draw and people feel they are able to talk.
In the next stage of the project, when we come together, we'll be doing a little bit more around that as well. And also, some of you have already asked, of those of you who are participating in the project, I've already asked you to send me some bits and pieces as well. So if you get a chance to do that, that would be great.
A related question, people ask where they can keep up with your project or your research.
Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I do that every day so many times. I'll put it in the chat, shall I? Some stuff about my work. And I'm really sorry, but I'm a bit old-fashioned. I think I've got, you know, about 10 images on Instagram or something like that, and I'm all over Twitter, which probably none of you use. So please forgive my middle-aged ways.
Pen also has a website. If you search her name, so you could find lots of artwork from her website as well.
Yeah, it's a bit out of date. I need to sort that out. A lot of my work at the moment is around COVID inequalities, the pandemic, and also I've done quite a lot around Black Lives Matter within the UK setting. So this is a great project for me to be learning so much more about other cities and experiences outside Britain. I feel really privileged to be doing that.
Okay, we have a question here. What's the time frame for your research? So I'm assuming that's referring to the project with the ambassadors.
So this project has a very quick turnaround, actually, Sammy. I think we're talking about the end of March.
Yes, so Pen is now interviewing ambassadors from both universities, and we will have the first draft of some of the sketches in about early to mid-March, where we will do a consultation with ambassador to see to enrich the content, and we are hopefully by end of March to early April to develop the final piece of artwork. And what we will be doing afterwards is to convert into a digital resources, but also convert into some print material. It could be poster, it could be things that we can use to support both universities to enable staff and students to have dialogue about these policies within both university and both cities. So we definitely have a range of materials ready in time before the beginning of next academic year.
There's a question that goes into more depth about if there's a particular approach to interviewing the students, and how do you then translate it to a piece of art?
So what I've been doing is starting with basically a blank canvas, which is what you showed as your final slide, which I loved. And doing a little caricature of the person that I'm speaking to, if they're happy with that, and then basically having a conversation. And as they go along, I use a lot of words. So I draw and I write. Mostly I'm writing during that time and just trying to capture what it is that I think they're saying. And because people can see me do that usually, they can also challenge the way that I'm interpreting and recording what they say. So it's quite a useful kind of way of working. The idea is not to produce award-winning artwork in any way. It's really just to support dialogue, to capture key themes so that I can come back to them when they're all together and then see the links and connections, see the contrasts between the different conversations that we had. I'm just going to also put in the chat a link to an interview I did about my work that also has a keynote in it that goes into more detail about the process, and it's kind of a bit more about the theory as well, if anyone's interested. Sorry, I can't multitask, so I can only do one thing at a time. There we go, done that. Yeah, but anyway, I never really know what's going to come out of a project, and I always, you know, have that kind of deep insecurity that I'm going to fail somehow, so I'm slightly terrified about what's going to happen next. But I've been loving meeting those of you who I've met so far, and yeah, really looking forward to seeing what we come up with together.
We have a question here. Is cartooning becoming safer and less willing to push boundaries?
Oh, fantastic question. I think it's becoming safer and also more dangerous. So I think, you know, if we think about the way views are so polarized at the moment, and I think the danger is that there's an assumption that people think that the arts is always good, the arts is always valuable and helpful to the world, but there's plenty of people using visual tools and approaches at the moment to stir up, incite hatred, to do negative things as well. So I think my approach, you could say, is towards the safer end, because I'm trying to do something helpful in the world at the moment. But actually, my PhD, one of the reasons I did my PhD is because I tend to get commissioned to do certain types of work, and I wanted a space where I could be a bit more experimental and perhaps less safe in what I was doing. And there's work that I did in my PhD that I've chosen not to publish, because if it was taken out of context, it could be misinterpreted and cause all sorts of difficulties. So I think it's really important that cartooning in the arts is a space where people can experiment, but personally, I have no interest in causing harm. I think we need to do more around critically engaging with cartooning in order to keep people safe and to make sure that what we're doing isn't going to cause people more harm or offence. Sometimes it's good to offend. Yeah, it depends. It depends on your perspective.
I think, as with the last Q&A, we're not going to be able to answer everybody's questions, but that's a good sign. People are enthusiastic. But I think we have time for 2 more. How do you think the UK differs from the Netherlands regarding your work?
I don't know. I couldn't answer that. I'd have to do some research about what's happening in Amsterdam in terms of the kind of work that I do. I know there are people doing the kind of thing that I do over there, but I don't know enough about their work to comment on it. There's an international forum for people that do this kind of work, but a lot of them don't work in EDI. It's quite corporate, this kind of work. Often it's used in businesses and marketing quite a bit, whereas I'm quite niche. I think I did the first PhD on this topic because most of my work is very much about inequalities. But there might be one in Dutch that I don't know anything about. So.
Sorry, I was muted. So I was just saying, I think I'm just trying to be conscious of time. I think Safaa is going to give an overview of the whole, the work that UvA and UoB Amsterdam, ambassadors have been doing. So if you just want to go ahead with that.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So to sum up today's event, our UvA speakers, Eline and Maxime, took us through the virtual tour of Amsterdam As we journeyed in the city, they showed us their favorite places that best represent EDI through the themes of sexuality, religion, freedom of expression, disability, and prosperity. On the Birmingham side, Dr. Sammy Lee gave us an overview on the benefits of visualizing experience on EDI to facilitate understanding and conversation, while Dr. Ben showed us some of her recent work that illustrates value-based cartooning through the themes of our university and cities that showcases EDI, intersectionality, engaging with lived experiences and multiple perspectives. I would like to thank our inspiring speakers for providing us such insight on such a relevant topic. If you would like to access today's recording, it will be available on the UvA EDI page. You can just Google UvA Festival EDI. And thank you everyone for joining us today.